We're watching Vladimir Putin run down Donald Trump's clock like some sort of mouse. 2 weeks, or rat. 2 weeks ago, Donald Trump promised that Moscow would soon learn which way he was going to go. But the 2-week test has now expired, and it's Putin who's filled up the vacuum, not Trump. All we hear about Trump is speculation about his health. I thought that was what we did with Putin. Putin is playing a double game. On the one hand, he invites Volodymyr Zelensky to Moscow for talks as though magnanimous, and then on the other, almost in the same breath, he says there's no point in meeting the Ukrainian president with missiles that he continues to direct that fall on Kyiv, Kharkiv and Kherson. The cruelty is deliberate. An invitation offered with one hand snatched away with the other while civilian apartments collapsed under Shahed drones and S-300 rockets. Dmitry Medvedev, once seen as a modernizer, now rages like a court jester turned executioner. His threats are extraordinary, almost surreal. He says if Britain spends any of the frozen Russian assets to fund Ukrainian defence, if London takes our money, he says, we will take Ukrainian land. I don't think it needs any threat from Britain to urge Russia to seize Ukrainian land. It's already doing that. If Britain seizes our interest payments, we will seize British property in Russia. Even, he said on Telegram, the valuables of the British Crown. This is more than theatre. It's a signal that Russia views frozen assets not as legal sanction, but as a casus belli for further expansion. At the same time, Medvedev rails against Finland, now a full NATO member, with 1,300 kilometres of shared border with Russia. He promises new deployments, new approaches, new weapons along that line, and he ridicules the Paris coalition of the willing, 26 states preparing contingents to reassure Ukraine after a ceasefire. As, in his words, that is bullshit. Well, this is the language of a man who's abandoned diplomacy for vulgarity, a man whose role is to bark when Putin whistles. He's one of Putin's many dogs or puppies. And yet, if we look closely, this performance betrays insecurity, for if Russia truly believed it had the upper hand, it wouldn't waste breath threatening Britain's property deeds or mocking Macron's summit, nor would Putin insist that any foreign peacekeepers in Ukraine would be legitimate targets for destruction. Such words are not those of confidence, but of fear that the West, fractured and hesitant, might one day stop hesitating. Trump, meanwhile, looks diminished. He warned Putin in Anchorage that his patience was finite. He told Europeans last week he could offer more air defence, more intelligence, even the shadow of a no-fly zone. But then came the caveats. Nothing agreed, only offered, subject always to the president's call. Trump says he has phases 2 and 3 in reserve, but each day that passes without action confirms to Moscow that this is just bluster, and Putin understands what George Kennan once wrote, the Kremlin advances until it meets real resistance. The tragedy is that in the absence of firm pressure, Putin escalates, and Russia has struck Ukrainian cities with more than 150 drones in a single night. It has killed humanitarian workers, hit residential blocks, and in a grotesque flourish even tried to jam the navigation of Ursula von der Leyen's aircraft in EU skies. This is not the behaviour of a state seeking peace, it's the behaviour of a regime that believes it can act with impunity. So, where are we? Putin runs down Trump's clock. Medvedev issues threats like a gangster in a faded suit, and Zelensky waits, refusing to cede territory, refusing to accept Moscow's invitation to talks that are empty before they even begin. Britain, Europe and Ukraine press ahead with support drawn from frozen assets, a symbol that Russia's wealth will be turned against it. What comes next will depend less on Putin's words than on the West's resolve. If Trump continues to hesitate, Putin will exploit the vacuum. If the coalition of the willing turns from planning to action, Russia will face consequences that it has long tried to avoid. The lesson is simple, though costly. Putin will not stop until he is stopped. And I think it's absolutely right to consider the possibility of using the Russian assets to help Ukraine. That makes perfect sense. We ought to stop talking about it and start doing it. And time, once again, is on the side of Putin. unless the West, and particularly Washington, decides to prove him wrong. We can't keep issuing threats and ultimata unless we make good on some sort of follow-up. I don't think saber rattling is the right way forward. I think there are other options that we can take. But this sort of theatre of showing fists on both sides is not something that is going to engineer peace. The Trump stubborn look is not a way forward, and the Putin dead stare, well, I don't think he can do much else. After all, he resides in the Smeg fridge. But the Putin I mean business look doesn't help either. There is only one way forward to this, and that is for Russia to have a new regime and to back away, to have an excuse to get out. At the moment, Russia and Putin have no excuse to leave this battlefield. They need the excuse. We need to engineer that excuse for them.